CultivatED Marketer, episode 34, Crisis Communications with Amy Whitfield. In this episode of CultivatED Marketer, we speak with crisis communications expert Amy Whitfield about the recent goings-on within the world of communication and marketing crises. That could include everything like a very bad branding decision that we've seen go viral, maybe poor choices at a rock concert, or even things where in the nonprofit world or in schools where we need to be ready for these vulnerable environments, situations that none of us want to see. Amy will walk through some of those situations and how marketing and communications can help handle those. So we had the opportunity to speak with Amy Whitfield. Matt, Julie, and I were able to be together in our second episode. It was great to have the whole group together. We've got an exciting lineup of different guests that are going to appear on the show, where we're going to talk everything from the Annenberg Mind the Gap study that tracks trends in PR. That's going to be a future episode. We're going to talk event marketing. We're going to talk with policy communication professionals, folks that are experts in social media, which is going to have a tie back to the Annenberg study, as well as the policy comms discussion. It'll have ties back to the Annenberg study. That will end up being a foundation, I think, for a lot of the communications we do. But in this episode, we speak, very timely episode, we speak with Amy Whitfield. She's a crisis communications expert that has worked for a lot of purpose-driven, faith-based organizations. She's now a consultant. She's written several books on the topic of crisis communications or crises. We'll feature a number of the books and the resources in the show notes, but it was an excellent conversation centered around how to best prepare yourself as a communicator or marketer, what the different roles are that a marketer or communicator can have, and how they work together as a team to best serve the organization and the organization's constituents. And what was really interesting and telling from this conversation we had with Amy in particular was because she's working with a lot of faith-based organizations, they're not just purchasing a product. There's a spiritual component of each of the individuals that may attend a church. There's a spiritual component to their life. And so that has to be met and served as well as dealing with whatever crisis is in front of you. So really a higher stakes approach and thinking that has to go into this as we're thinking about crisis communications. The other thing we talked about, very timely components of things that are going on, is everything from the Coldplay concert and how to best not, put yourself in those situations, to the missteps that Cracker Barrel has seemingly made around their rebranding and how to address those things. And again, because Amy is working within faith-based organizations like churches, she's talking about these vulnerable environments like schools and churches that have to be ready for the next crisis, even though you hope that day never comes. So we really have a phenomenal conversation with Amy about all of those topics. And with that, I'm going to let you get into that discussion that we have with Amy Whitfield talking about crisis communications. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing, professional development, so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
And I'm Matt Tidwell.
And I'm Julie Masson.
Awesome to have everybody here with this for this episode. Going to be a very engaging episode with our guest. Our guest is a communications and PR specialist who consults primarily for churches and faith-based organizations. She was previously the executive director of communications at the Summit Church, and prior to that, she served in various roles at Southern Baptist Convention Entities for 20 years. She's co-authored the book, SBC FAQs, a ready reference, as well as Ministering to the Whole Woman. In 2019, she helped launch the SBC Women's Leadership Network and currently serves as board chair for Women and Work. Amy Whitfield, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Amy, we are so glad that you're here. Amy was my invite to the show. She is the person that I called when I was working in-house communications, when I was dealing with the crisis. So we're very excited to have her here to talk about crisis comms. So let's get into it. All right, Amy, I need you to tell me, how did you get into the world of crisis comms? Because I think it takes a special person to enjoy this kind of high stakes, off-hour style communications work. I know for me, when I had to handle it, I hated it so much, which is why I would call you. So tell us why in the world you like this field of communications and how you got into it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, enjoy, those are strong words, because most of the time whenever there's a crisis that's happening, I have those moments where I think, why did I sign up for this? I don't know. But I think it's not anything I set out to do. I actually didn't set out to work in communications. I was a politics major and wanted to maybe work on Capitol Hill, do something like that, but then got involved in denominational work, was experiencing sort of my own just call to service and ministry spaces. And it was in that I ended up on a team that had several responsibilities, but comms was one of them at Lifeway. And I think, I'm a researcher. I am somebody who likes to figure out everything that is going on and then try to think through best responses. I like to look at what's happening and say, okay, here's where the dominoes will fall. If this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And so a lot of those things come to bear really well when there is a crisis. And so it just kind of happened. I just kind of fell into it. And then it ended up being really one of the primary things that I did. And you're the one that I call whenever I would have more marketing type questions, because that's the kind of thing that I can do, but it just doesn't really get my energy going at all. So you're the proactive, I'm the reactive.
That's a great way to describe the different angles that we both take with marketing and communications.
So you mentioned, Amy, maybe not because you question every time you get into, you're working through one of these, but when did you feel like, at what point did you feel like, saying that I love crisis comms is a hard thing to say, but what would you say, I have my capabilities match with the work? Like, at what point in time in the journey did you say that the things I can bring to the table end up aligning with the solutions I can help these people, the entities? Where in your journey did you find that aligned?
I'm not sure if I can say exactly when it happened. I was in a space, as you mentioned, I worked in Southern Baptist life for many, many years. And in the last 7 to 8 years, if anybody's been following Southern Baptist news, there's been a lot of crises at various places. So you're in it and it's happening a lot. I had heard an interview years ago of somebody that was a screenwriter, and the interviewer asked her, when do you find time to write? And she said, I don't have to find time to write. Writing is like breathing to me. And that really stuck with me. I thought, okay, what are the things that are like, you don't have to really think, you just sort of are natural. You just know what to do. And that was just a defining way to think about things. And when I was doing communications and marketing, whenever a crisis would come, that was the thing that I knew, okay, here's what we need to do next. That doesn't mean you get every single step right, but it was something that was a bit more natural to me. And I noticed that. And then honestly, I was just in a space where we were dealing with a lot of crises all the time. And so you just begin to develop that muscle.
Yeah, that's that was probably the follow-up I was going to ask you, and you led right into it, was this notion of developing muscle memory and this this ability to go through this. Matt and I used to like to joke that him being the world of academics, he was academia. I'm the school of hard knocks, right? So that's kind of what we were bringing to the show. And I think what kind of training? So the muscle memory is one part of it, but what kind of training can folks seek out beyond just throwing yourself, like searching out every fire that's out there,
right,
and trying to develop muscle memory, survive and develop muscle memory?
I do not recommend my education in it, trial by fire. But yeah, I mean, there are some great books that are out there on crisis communication that can help. There's lots of great resources, lots of great podcasts, and then lots of communications podcasts like what you all are doing will cover this. Yeah, Julie just popped up one, Crisis Communications, a Casebook Approach. Yeah, there you go.
I have used this book. I have pulled it out in the midst of a crisis and referenced it.
Yes, it's great.
So because this is an audio podcast, folks won't be able to see that. Julie, can you read the title and the author again, and we'll put that in the show notes?
Yes. Crisis Communications, a Casebook Approach. Oh, a certain Matt Tidwell is the one who got me reading that book for a class.
All right. Who's the author?
Kathleen Fern Banks.
Yep. Fern Banks.
Fern Banks. All right. Awesome.
Yeah. And there really are some great ones. I mean, there's one called You're It, Crisis Change and How to Lead When It Matters Most by Leonard Marcus and some other people. But there's a ton. Like you can go on Amazon and really look. And it does begin to help you see what it is crisis comms. It helps you to start putting together that there are just things that happen that all of a sudden you have to change your plan. You have a way that you do things, a way that you speak to your constituents. And now your constituents have a need. They have an anxiety. They're confused and they need to know good information. And in the space that I work in the most, I do some for businesses and for kind of your standard nonprofits, but a lot of what I do is with churches and in faith-based organizations. And so you have the stakes are a little bit higher there because you've got people who have really a spiritual presence in the lives of their audience or of their constituents. And so they really can't afford to get it wrong. The people need their voice. They need to hear from them. They need to not have gaps in information. They need to be cared for in how they are communicated to. And so there's an extra layer, I think, for crisis comms when you're in ministry spaces, just because the folks are looking for spiritual direction at the same time. And so a lot of care has to come into how it's handled.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amy. That particular space, and there's a lot of spaces that I obviously do a lot of work in crisis myself, and
yeah.
But you make a great point about just how things can get ratcheted up depending on the space that you're in. And Brent, can I just say I'm so glad that Julie brought Amy in here for the show, because I think in the years we've had it, I don't think we've really focused very. I mean, we've had some practitioners on that have done crisis and things like that, and we've sort of touched on it. But it's such an important area to this particular slice. And as I work with students, I teach crisis communications, and I'm sure you see this as well, Amy, with just talking with the practitioners, but particularly young students, they'll look at me sort of quizzically like, is this really going to impact me? You know, is it,
right.
I'll be a lot older. I'll have this big organization around me. I'll probably be able to handle it and everything will be fine. Yeah. And my point to them is always, it's not a question of if, it is a question of when.
Yes, that's right.
And we can all think individually of moments where, and it usually catches you by surprise, which you sort of alluded to. And so just so glad that we can get you in to dig more deeply into this topic. So thanks for being here. But I wanted to ask you, obviously, the nice thing about crisis is you never have to go look very far for examples because they're all
That's
around
right.
us.
They're everywhere.
You know, whether it's Jumbotron shenanigans or Cracker Barrel or
right.
any of that, right? It's there. And it's easy to see why a corporation might have like a crisis of reputation. But for those of us who don't really work much in the nonprofit space, certainly faith-based, other nonprofits, I know that obviously you've alluded to it, they face crises as well. What are some of those common crises that nonprofits should be more prepared for, just in terms of the type of crisis, let's say?
Yeah, typically they are crises that really deal with people, issues with people, whether there's something that happens with a volunteer, there's something that happens with a leader or a staff member. And so what you have in organizations like that is it's so easy for trust to be broken. And that's what can happen if there is, sometimes you get a past crisis. We've had a lot of situations with churches where people have come forward to share about something that happened to them 25 years ago. And you've got leaders who are trying to understand, how do we handle this? How do we care for this person that is in front of us? But then also, how do we speak to our entire constituency about it? And so a lot of times they are deeply, deeply personal crises that kind of start with one person.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you about unlikely crises, but you just sort of described that away. I mean, those are something that might happen more frequently in that space.
Right. And also the things that, as you said, the corporations have reputational crises, and like a logo that offends every single one of their customers. So that's a bad decision. That's just something that happened, and they had to figure out how to reverse that. But you also have the crises that you can't control. A lot of the tragedies that happen, that's actually something external that happens to the organization or to the people in it. So some of these places, shootings or other things that we see all too often, that's a crisis, because in that moment, what you're doing is, it's not about your reputation. You're not trying to do that, but you have a crisis that you have to communicate about. You have, whether it's parents that are looking for information, whether it's the public that's asking questions about what happened, whatever it is, you've got people that you need to communicate to. And where the problem can come in is if you don't do that well, if you don't think about it, if you are not prepared for it, and then you have gaps in communication, and people that hurts people. That's a negative and awful experience for them. And so you are trying to step in that gap.
Yeah, that is a really key point I think you made about, specifically with nonprofits, about how you're navigating a broken trust issue often, or a tragedy that has happened outside of the organization that you can't have any control over. So in that same vein, what are some simple things a nonprofit can do to prepare for a crisis? Because I know for me, the first time I had an official leadership role leading a communications team, literally on day one, I was navigating one of the worst crises we could have experienced, and had national media attention. I had to write a press release and press statements due to a tragedy. And I had taken Matt's crisis cons class, which set me up well. But I remember within an hour of my first day, sitting on my steps, because I'm a remote worker, and having to start typing things out on my phone. And I don't know how I could have been prepared for something like that. So what are some things a nonprofit or any kind of organization can do to prepare for a major crisis?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do is to think about it before something happens, because when a crisis happens, your adrenaline's going to get started. Things are going to be moving very fast, and the more decisions you can make beforehand, the better. So one thing is identifying loosely who your sort of crisis team will be. I mean, that's where you think, is it your executive leadership? Who are the decision makers in your organization? Or if you want to say generally, when a crisis happens, it's going to be the executive team plus whoever is the supervisor or director over a particular area. So then that way you don't have to stop and think, who do we need to pull together? You are already able to instinctively know when something happens. So thinking through who your crisis team would be, who your point people would be. So at the organization that I was just at and continue to do things for at the Summit Church, everybody knew their first step. If there's something that we don't know what to do, then these are the people we call. And then that kind of starts the ball rolling. So knowing who your point people are, who your crisis team is, mapping out circles of communication. So if you think through who are the people that you are going to need to inform, I always like to work backwards. So I think through, if you have something that is going to be announced to the general public, so whether it's through a media statement or whatever, that's the most extreme thing. If that's where you're going to end up, think backwards. Who doesn't need to be hearing that for the first time? So if you've got something that maybe involves, a lot of times churches, they have things that are connected to the children's ministry. Think about it. You don't need to give a quote to the media and then there's a parent that is hearing it on the news. They need to hear from you. So go to sort of the largest audience and then work backwards and make your plan for who to notify in what order. So that's usually the first question that we ask as we sit down and say, who are the circles of communication? And then thinking through what your procedures are. I'm big on internal FAQs. So that's what, so then people have talking points, and then do what you can to connect with media that and build relationships so that then they know to call you, they know to reach out, and you are able to interact with them quickly. So I think establishing just thinking a little bit ahead of time. I mean, really, it's like a fire drill. You have fire drills to make sure people know that when a fire happens, this is how we walk out of the room. This is the spot we go to. It's the same type of thing. If you sit down in one afternoon and just imagine, what if this happened here? Any crisis that you see, what if this happened here? What would we do? You're able to do that in a moment when you don't have panic, when you don't have quick things that you have to do. You're able to get it in your mind.
I can so appreciate that, keeping the end in mind and then working backwards. I've been in some organizations where we would do periodic tabletop exercises, do a whole day where we'd go off site from a business continuity standpoint. Like if something had happened, and then you and Julie even alluded to this, when you work all the way backwards, you led with this, but when you work all the way backwards, it starts with your crisis team.
Right.
And then even specifically, you guys were even giving each other kudos, but you were talking about how you can help Julie and how Julie helps you, right, as a compliment.
Right.
And this show really brings together both communication professionals as well as marketers. So knowing that we're assembling a team, how can marketers, they each come at it from a different angle. How can marketers and comms professionals best prepare for a crisis together?
I would say the first thing is really just building relationship and having those open lines of communication to work together. Because in one sense, when the marketing team, they are proactive, they're producing content, they're putting things out there all the time. When it becomes a moment that you have to be reactive, there's a sense in which sometimes all that has to stop, depending on how big the crisis is. Like,
that's right.
All your channels have to shut down. You can't be, if your organization is dealing with something that is really difficult, then that great thing that you were about to advertise or to push could all of a sudden look tone deaf or flippant or whatever. And so it almost is one of those, if you don't have a good relationship and a good bridge to each other, it's like the right hand and the left hand are doing totally different things. And so being able to work together, and then knowing that the person who is really running point in a crisis is going to need access to a lot of the channels that the marketers use possibly. And so you sort of become almost like, hey, we're going to have to pivot. We got to call an audible here in the strategy and say, how do we exist when everyone is looking to us about whatever this is that is happening? How do we show up for that? And then how do we slowly, as we move back to normalcy, get back to our focus on marketing and promoting the good news and the good things that we're doing? And it's a balance, right? I mean, I was in one organization that saw a lot of crisis, and it was very difficult for leadership that it seemed like we were always talking about bad things. And the question, why can't we talk about all the good things? And we said, well, we have to really strike a balance, because if all we do is push that, then it looks like we're not acknowledging what's happening over here. And so you have to both have to work together.
Yeah. And I would add to that by saying, especially if you are managing the social media channels, the first thing I'm thinking is, what do I have scheduled? And then I would do this, because the organization I worked at for 8 years, we had also regular crises as well. So the first thing I would do if I knew something had come up is I would go to whatever tool I was using to schedule posts and go, we need to pull that. And then having, as Amy, I like what you said about, it's almost like in a moment, the crisis plan definitely supersedes everything else. And you've got to be, if you're the marketer, you got to be willing to say, hey, I'm here to support you. What do you need? I'm here to help.
Yeah, such great points. And that tone deaf thing, right? That tone deaf thing is real.
Oh,
We see it all the time. I was trying to explain it to my students, and there had been just a quick story. There'd been an unfortunate, and we hear about it too often, as you mentioned, this was a few years ago, a active shooter at a university. And I think it ended up they ended up like catching the guy or whatever. But for quite a while, it was an unknown. People were in lockdown, and it was at a major university, right? Stuck in classrooms and things like that. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. So I went to their website, and on their website, it was recruiting season. And there's all these happy, smiley co-eds, and they're throwing footballs on the same quad that was now had armed guards on it.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how easy would it have been to just have what do they call it? Like a shadow website ready to be pulled up. I'm sure you coach that to people as well.
Yeah.
So that they don't appear so tone deaf. And so I showed that to my students, like, oh yeah, that was dumb.
Right. And another one that I remember, I mean, this was years ago. This was like 15 years ago or something. And this wasn't even an organizational crisis with the person. This was something in the news that had happened that involved, I believe it was an explosion of some kind. And there was a leader, it was a ministry leader, had scheduled tweets for because that's what a lot of people do. They schedule out tweets. And there was some tweet that said, I can't remember if it was like, whatever this thing that they were about to launch is going to explode or is going to go off like a bomb or something like that. And it hit at the worst possible time. And so then this person who's not even involved got so much, like, people thought this is the most insensitive thing. And so one of the first things you have to think through in a crisis is, do we have anything scheduled to go out? Do we have an email scheduled to go out? Do we have social media posts that are scheduled to go out? Get in there, look and see what's coming and take it down. If it is insensitive, if it is anything. Yeah. Those are little things that you don't think about in the moment, especially because you got so many other things to think about. So if you have a plan, then you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of a nice segue because and this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today. This is terrific. And just a couple closing questions as we finish here. But I know that it's a constant. The constancy needs to be continuous learning, right? In this space, just like all others. Are there certain things that you recommend to fellow marketing communications professionals regarding crisis communications preparation, et cetera? I know I was once in an organization where I was quite a few people reporting to me as a communications department, and I required that everybody have media training, that everybody get a chance to practice that. And so it could be that or anything. But I know it was very helpful. And I had some people like, well, I'll never be able to have a microphone in front of my face. I'm like, oh my gosh, we never say never in crisis. But those kinds of things. Are there that or anything else?
I mean, I do think, we shared some books. There are some great resources out there, and it doesn't take long to go and find some of them. I think one thing that gets missed, because you can get a lot of great technical training in it, is to know if you are going to step into crisis communications, or if you're going to step into a communications leadership role where you will become a crisis communications specialist at some point. It is really important to sort of keep tabs on your own humanity and the humanity of others, because dealing in crisis communication can really be tough on your own soul. You also are always having to watch and care for others, because you're around a lot of people who are experiencing pain and difficulty. And so it takes a lot of care and compassion. And so I do like to just recommend that as you learn and you get some of the technical stuff, you just keep the humanity at the center of it. So, yeah.
Well said.
Amy, is there anything else you want to mention that we might not have talked about? And also, will you tell our listeners where can they connect with you if they want to know more about what you do or if they need your help?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe one other thing that we didn't talk about is when we talked about working with marketers, just training your whole team to know what they do, to know what their boundaries are. because a lot of times you will have an entire team that feels like they have to carry the burden for everything. So if people know, no, you do not, if the media call, you send them here. If this happens, you do it. You don't have to do that. I think that's really important. You know, you're caring for them in the process as well. So it's not just about the one person who is most responsible, but about the team that is around you, helping develop them and to know what burdens they need to carry and what they don't have to. I think for what I do, I do work with clients through a firm called Michael Best Strategies. And so you can find me there or on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of stuff about what I do on there, and you can reach out and connect.
Great content on LinkedIn, by the way. I was watching.
Yes, and hopefully Amy will be doing more. She knows I've been pushing her to write more on LinkedIn because her skill set is much needed.
For sure.
I may or may not have even written her one.
She has. Julie's pushing me. Yes.
Look at you. You've got a professional coach working there for you.
I do.
That's awesome.
She's amazing. Yes. She's amazing.
That's awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being on and sharing your time and your stories with us. And even honestly, when you ended on humanity, I couldn't think of a better way to end the show. So thank you so much for showing us humanity in this episode and helping us to maintain it for the organizations we work with. So I really appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatEDMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with Cultivated Marketer.